The QUO Podcast. Change your way.
Today I'm interviewing my brilliant friend, Tanya Silveira. Tanya is a registered music therapist and Ph.D. graduate researcher, investigating the role of iPad-based music therapy in stroke rehabilitation. Her current research examines how accessible music making can positively impact hand function and well-being in stroke survivors. In November 2019, she gave a TEDx talk on the subject. Over the years, Tanya has successfully established multiple ongoing music therapy programs in Australia and India. Identifying as an Australian of Indian origin, Tanya is now working hard to advocate for the importance of visibility and representation in music therapy and beyond. So what exactly is music therapy? And what is the difference between it and, say, musicians coming into play at an aged care facility? Music therapy is a research-based allied health profession in which music is used to actively support people as they aim to improve their health, functioning, and well-being. Importantly, music therapists are committed to supporting people of any age, ability, or background. It is upon this spirit of inclusion, as well as what I have always observed as an unparalleled drive and authenticity, that Tanya's advocacy is founded. Tanya, thanks so much for speaking to me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ali.
Well, I guess I wanted to launch straight into what you're up to at the moment, which is a web series that you've recently launched. Can you tell me a little bit about the story behind that web series and the kind of questions that you're wanting to provoke?
Yeah, so I guess the important aspect of the story that led to the web series is in the name itself of the web series. I've called it L-FENT. I love elephants, as you can see here. But L-FENT actually stands for Learning from Experiences, Not Textbooks. And it kind of emerged last year as a direct result of a racist encounter that I had at a social gathering where a person decided that their knowledge and expertise in history was superior to my lived experience of adversity. So I decided, though I walked away from the conversation, and I decided that was my way to deal with it in the moment. That conversation didn't leave me, and I wanted to do something with it. So I decided to, brainstorm a creative way to ensure that people aren't just learning from these textbooks. So this web series, L-FENT, or Learning from Experiences, Not Textbooks, is my sort of creative way of coping with that particular incident, and also from learning from a lot of other people of colour or people who are Black or Indigenous. Just my way of amplifying my own voice and other voices in regards to lived experience and how that should be on the top of the pecking order when it comes to education, not just what some Western perspective person has decided to write in a textbook.
Exactly. And I guess this is not just about music therapy. This is about education more broadly. So I'm interested in the kind of people you've decided to interview for this series. Are you confining yourself to music therapists, or is it a more broad discussion?
Yeah, I think it's really important to always start smaller and contained in a way, just to kind of get conversations starting, because that's essentially what this web series is about. And so after being part of our National Music Therapy Conference last year, where I moderated a panel of music therapists from around the world and also local, who were Black, Indigenous, people of colour, we decided collectively that these conversations need to keep going within the realm of music therapy, because if you want to think about change in a global sense or a more broader sense, you kind of have to start more specifically, I believe,
Exactly.
and kind of meet, you know, the immediate kind of population. So for my context, it's within music therapy, and then the conversations that will emerge from these web series will, of course, be applicable more broadly than music therapy, but the context that we've decided to start with is music therapy.
Well, that seems very relevant. I guess linking to what you were discussing about the importance of lived experience, I know that you had a profound connection with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement last year after the death of George Floyd. I guess, how did these protests make you see your own experience of growing up in Australia as someone from Indian origin in a different light?
Yeah, I guess the first thing that I need to acknowledge is that from the experiences that I have had, as adversive as they may have been, they are incomparable to what Black and Indigenous folk have experienced. And um, you know, in thinking about the death of George Floyd and the reignited Black Lives Matter movement, I definitely identified with a lot of the themes and the stories coming out of it. But I just want to be very clear that I will never understand what Black and Indigenous people face on a daily basis, because that is something that is just, it's, you know, I don't even know. I don't even have the words for it.
Well, I guess it links to what you were saying about the importance of lived experience.
Yeah,
and I guess if you haven't lived that experience, you can never fully understand.
Exactly.
But what you can understand is your own experience. And that's a very unique experience. So I'd love to learn a little bit. Well, I know you, but I'd love for the audience to know a little bit more about you and your personal history growing up in Australia, especially, you know, both your parents were recent migrants from India, but also they were both musicians. And I think that's very significant in your personal journey to music therapy.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I guess thinking back to when the Black Lives Movement when they were reignited, there was an image that I saw that kind of, well, there were so many images actually, but there's a particular image that made me reflect upon my color of my skin. For those listening, I'm a person of color, Indian origin, so brown, dark brown skin, where there was a wall of people, is how it was described in the image description, where there were people who were white and they had their arms linked, and it was like a wall of people, like a chain. They formed a chain, and the purpose of that was to keep the Black and people of color safe from the police. This was in the States, a buffer. And that image, when I saw that image, I broke down, because it just made me think, I look like that, and it means that I can't really look after myself without a white person paving the way for me. And that's the first thought that came to my mind, which was really challenging, because growing up in Australia, I was so fortunate that my parents always ensured that, you know, my siblings and I felt like we could do anything that we wanted in the world. You know, we never thought that we couldn't do something, because that was the way we were raised. Yet this image, and then the more I read about adverse experiences of people of color, such as myself, I started to realize, actually, I've had those experiences too, but my parents are really strong and empowering people. So I didn't think about that much growing up. So that kind of made me think quite deeply, and I spent a lot of time reflecting personally, but also linking back in with my family and talking to them about these feelings and about these past experiences that I almost started to have flashbacks about, and question, like, why did that happen to us? Like, that shouldn't have happened to us, you know? And so I think it was, really important to reflect with them as well.
It was a collective experience. I can imagine it's almost
seeing that personal history in a different light.
Yeah.
Because I even remember early in our friendship, you telling me a few stories of you and your sister walking in your local suburb and just being the victim of racial abuse.
Yeah.
And do you feel like your relationship to those events has changed as a result, or is it more kind of catharsis?
I think it's this cathartic feeling, because I feel the challenge for me is that I feel like I've been brought up privileged, because I'm very fortunate to have loving parents and a supportive family, and opportunities for education. And a lot of other people who are from migrant backgrounds identify a lot with this, and as do I. This feeling of immense gratitude to be in this land. And with that in mind, of course, my gratitude and my family's gratitude are to the traditional custodians of the land, because this is their land that we're on, and this is the land that we are able to have opportunity that we would not have had perhaps in our motherland. So it's this interesting feeling of, you feel really grateful and you feel really honored, but at the same time, now coming into more, I guess, having more conversations about adversity, it's now time for us to, yes, continue feeling grateful to the traditional custodians of the land, but also acknowledge that we have a right to have a good life, and we have a right to move up in our careers, and we have a right to speak out. And gratitude is a really important part of my upbringing, but I can't keep just feeling gratitude for opportunities that I'm working hard towards, as a lot of people of colour I've spoken to have a similar kind of feeling.
You need to own your success.
Own it, yes. That's the way of saying
I'm
it.
so proud
You need to
of you.
own it. And it's really hard also, not just being a person of colour and, first generation migrant background, but also being a woman. It's sometimes there's this thing that's put in our brains that we must be
small,
grateful, and
we need to be grateful.
Yeah.
But I admire you for advocating not only for others but also for yourself and for your research and your music therapy practice. And I guess what you've been talking about that gratefulness towards the traditional custodians of the land actually links to what I wanted to say next, which was in regards to your trailblazing research article that you've recently published in November 2020. So you didn't just have these thoughts, you put it all on paper. And it explored how your approach to music therapy advocacy, especially in stroke research, has been shaped by your own personal history and experiences as an Australian of Indian origin. So I guess, was it a confronting process to start to think really critically about music therapy institutions and the unique challenges that are faced by music therapists of colour in Australia, but also around the world?
Yeah, it was that article, I should mention, the process of writing that, it actually started as a journal article. I never thought I would share
a personal journal.
Yeah,
wow. Yes.
I never thought I would actually share it with the world and reframe some of the language and how I had written it, because it's a commentary piece essentially. So I did that as a way to help me cope and to help me write down my feelings and just my thoughts that maybe were intense, because they were my feelings and they were valid, and I validated myself in that process. But I started talking to some friends who were music therapists, people of colour and white, and they were saying, you should share this. And I realised that when I was writing it, I kept thinking, I wish someone told me this was what it was going to be. This was what it was going to be like. And so I hope...
The process of writing, or the process of being a music therapist of colour?
Yeah, a bit of both. But I guess more specifically, being a music therapist who's a person of colour, the kinds of challenges that I face are different to people who have a different, perhaps, cultural background or physical appearance. And in writing this article, I didn't want it to be this kind of pointing the finger thing at all. I wanted to draw upon the fact that music therapists work with a person's strengths. That's why it's such a great discipline. And so when people read it, I wanted them to draw upon their own strengths and consider, you're an empathic person most likely if you're in the therapeutic field.
Hopefully so.
And so draw upon your strengths of being, empathic and think about this as a way forward, because there was no point in me saying like, this is what you've done wrong. But a lot of what drove that was not so much a pointing the finger, but more of a questioning. So considering the music therapy programs are both incredible programs with incredible teaching staff. But in writing this article, I started to consider my cultural heritage, which is from India, and started to think about the importance of music in Indian classical music, for example, which is not my kind of background, but looking at the kind of healing properties of music, which exists in Eastern cultures or Eastern medicine and Indigenous cultures as well. And I just kept thinking, why isn't this taught in the courses? Like, we don't own music and we don't own music as therapy. So maybe a way forward. So
none of this is taught. It's just a completely Western focus? Or?
Well, I think it depends, because I obviously haven't learnt through courses in a while. But I think there is a lot of respect in both courses in regards to cultural diversity. But in writing this article, I just kept thinking, wouldn't it be great, not just in Australia, but this is globally, wouldn't it be great if there was more focus on the origins of music as therapy when teaching music therapy? Because music therapy is, it's not, it existed long before any of us did. Really.
Yes, that's a really interesting idea, because even from my limited understanding of music therapy, you always think music plus therapy, that the two things are separate. But really what you're saying is, in many cultures, music itself was a form of therapy and healing.
Well, creativity in any culture. Yeah. When you look at Eastern and Indigenous cultures all over the world, you see artworks, you see dance, you see song, you see singing, you see music, and it's
a release. It's a catharsis. Remember when I used to do drama long ago, and I swear that was a wonderful form of therapy.
Yeah.
I guess I'm really interested in how this article was received. Firstly, by other music therapists who are people of color, because I guess that is one of the audiences you were writing to.
Yeah, I was so humbled to receive emails from people all over the world just saying how much what I had written in the article resonated with them. And for me, even just getting one email from one person saying that made the whole process worthwhile. It was just, very humbling. But, there are always two sides to a story. And I did hear through a colleague that some people working within the medical model, so in a hospital setting, for example, did not appreciate, let's say, some of the writing, because in the article, I was basically saying that you can't separate your identity from the work. And I work in a medical model, which, might seem to be more black and white, because it's not a community setting, it's a medical model. And I'm saying, no, you actually can't.
In any setting.
No.
Yes.
And so there were some people who disagreed with that. Interestingly, though, they were not people of color.
Well, revealingly, I guess I'm interested also in the music therapy institution. Have people been receptive, fellow music therapists who might be white music therapists? Are they open to kind of that introspection that you've asked them to do?
Yeah, I've had some really beautiful feedback from colleagues and teachers, and sharing the article and pushing it forward as a prescribed reading for music therapy education overseas. In a couple of weeks, I'll be speaking to some music therapy students in the States who were given this article as a prescribed reading.
Wow.
So that kind of, I guess, was a goal, just to have music therapy education include, if not this particular article, but articles like this, so that people can consider these perspectives as a way forward as part of their learning. Also drawing upon, it's important to consider disability commentaries and experiences as well. There's another really great paper that has been released about that as well in music therapy, and learning from people with lived experience, not just me as a person of color, but I think it has a ripple effect from
it's
going
opening
forward.
the door
Yeah.
to other music therapists to share how their identity
I
and
hope so.
experiences impact their work. Well, yeah, it sounds like already there's been a huge amount of discussion. I guess we should talk a little bit about some of the other things you're doing. So you're in the process of finishing off your PhD at the moment. So you're a very busy woman, and your PhD's focus is on stroke rehab interventions. I guess we don't necessarily need to go into detail about what it's about, but I was thinking about stroke and cardiovascular diseases and just the demographics that, for example, in Australia for cardiovascular diseases, it's 50% more likely for Indigenous Australians to suffer from those diseases, and that's got a clear link to stroke. So I wanted to ask you, what kind of options do Indigenous Australians have when it comes to music therapy for people who are either Indigenous themselves or educated in culturally sensitive practices?
I think this is, it's challenging within the realm of music therapy in that, the number of Indigenous people to the number of Indigenous music therapists in relation to the number of Indigenous people who may require or who may benefit from music therapy. Like it's just not enough. From memory, there are currently 2 Indigenous music therapists in the whole of Australia.
That's not
so
really.
No, and even when you think about it, obviously I can't speak from an Indigenous perspective, but even from a perspective as a person of colour, I think there is merit and significance in having a therapist who is from a similar background. Like, for example, my psychologist is from an Indian background, and that really works for me because I feel like she understands a lot of what is unsaid in our sessions. And it's challenging. Like in the health system, we do all this competency training around working with Indigenous health or Aboriginal health workers, and that's really important, and that's a first step. But we need to find more ways to encourage more access and even make courses more accessible for people from more diverse backgrounds, and more specifically from people who are from an Indigenous background, because the way that a lot of therapeutic courses are taught are really from that Western perspective. So, I mean, to answer your question, it's just not enough. It's incomparable. Like to know that statistic exists, and there's nothing that's happening at the moment to move forward. Not just in music therapy, but in any kind of therapeutic medical service. So all we can do, I believe, is just to work with Indigenous people, learn from them, pay them for their time, because this is their knowledge. We can't just expect people to tell us things for free. They're experts. They live and breathe this, and we need to keep learning as a way forward, and pay the rent.
We definitely need to pay the rent. Well, this final question, it's a little bit more personal. Obviously, we're friends. We've been friends for a long time. And I feel like when I met you in your early 20s, I'm sure you were younger than me then, I guess you didn't used to advocate for yourself and for others as, I guess,
at all?
Oh, no. I guess it's just been a journey. And it's something that I really admire, that ability to advocate for yourself and others. So I was thinking, I know you're very humble and you probably don't want to be called an expert or leader in neuro rehab when it comes to music therapy, but I think you are. And I'm sure young music therapists would really love to hear your perspective and advice, especially music therapists who are also people of color, on joining the field and what you think the future holds for music therapy.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that, the first word that came to my mind was unique. And I guess it's something that I never really wanted to embrace, being unique when I was younger. But I knew, now that I'm trying to move beyond this just feeling humble thing and just owning what I've achieved and where I've come from and who I've become, I think I'm just trying to own this uniqueness, or this thing that drives me, and share it with the world in the hope that other people will see that their own uniqueness within them, and again share it with the world. And so for people who are newer to the field, whether they are coming from different disciplines, or they've just finished undergrad to come and do the masters, I would just say channel your uniqueness and your essence and what drives you, because even thinking about the PhD, gosh, I never thought I'd do a PhD. I just thought it sounded like a lot of work, which it is, and I didn't think I wanted to get into research. It didn't sound like it was for me, though I completely respected all researchers. It's a lot of hard work. But the thing that drove me was my passion. And I think the thing that drove that passion was that uniqueness within me, that I wanted to do more for people. And, just when you enter a field, be it music therapy or anything, like bring your unique self. Saying unique a lot, aren't I? Bring your unique bring your unique self, because you shouldn't be like everyone else, because you're yourself. And that's something that I kept trying to be when I was younger. I kept trying to be like everyone else. I didn't embrace who I was. So that is what will kind of set you apart. And I guess on a final note, and something that I've been trying to live my whole life as a result of my parents, is just be kind to people. Just be kind. You never know what will happen for you as an individual, that feeling you'll get, but just being a kind person. You don't have to go tell everyone about how kind you are. Just be kind
and humble.
Yeah.
Great combo. And I think you're both. I really admire you, Tanya, and it's been a pleasure having you on the QUO podcast. I would like you to be able to talk a little bit about where people can find you, because it's not only a web series that you've done, you've also done a TEDx talk. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just in the process of finalizing my new website. But if you are interested to check out some of the things that I'm doing, or some of the reflections that I have, I'd encourage you to follow me on Instagram. So it's at tanya.marie.sil. And on that, I've got a little link for upcoming workshops and publications, as well as little kind of thoughts of my own, just to prompt thinking for advocacy.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Tanya. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ali.